Hey folks, how's it going? Chris here from MoDXtra Games and Collectibles. Absolute pleasure to have you with me here today. It's time for another collector talk video. These are just where I get on camera, go quick and dirty using my phone and my little portable microphone to share some thoughts around some stuff I've seen happening in the adult collector community right now and add my perspective as a fellow adult collector. Not in the armchair though today, bad back again, so I'm in the lumbar supported chair. And I thought I'd give you a different view of the man cave. Why not? I've also got really floppy, flicky hair. I had my hat on when I walked the dog before, and now I've got a kind of Farrah Fawcett vibe going on, which is a reference I'm pretty confident most of my viewing demographic will understand. Anyway, what's the topic of today's Collector Thought? Well, the topic of today's Collector Thought I'm going to label as reuse fatigue. Saw some stuff going on around and about in the socials, and there was a bit of a conversation that some of my Joe Bros over on the Frontline Discord were having, which, once again, if you're not a member, head to the description down below, click the link and come and join us. Great place for man-child playtime chat. And I'll put them on screen now over the top of me while I'm talking so you can see what I'm talking about. But this is what triggered the thought around reuse fatigue. It's the big bad workshop, fresh monkey fiction, Operation Monster Force release announcements, basically. So there's been a couple in the last few days. We've had some new characters from the Dark Directive side of things, and then the Gridiron Studios skull mask dude. I'll have a little rolling gallery, providing future editing Chris has done his job correctly. And, you know, these look like pretty badass figures. The Gridiron stuff looks pretty shit hot, nice and mean, good army builder action there. I like the Dark Directive stuff as another complementary subline in the overall Operation Monster Force vibe. However, I've also seen a lot of commentary on Facebook, on Instagram, on Frontline, as I say, where folks are just calling out the level of reuse that we're seeing from Fresh Monkey Fiction. And, you know, these folks are not wrong. There is an awful lot of reuse in the Fresh Monkey Fiction line. It's you know, that kind of core vest, the core uniform body, all those kind of things. It's the weapon selection, the accessory selections, the customization that they put in there, the like little kitbashy elements to embellish the tactical vest and that type of thing. We're seeing a lot of the same stuff just getting churned out over and over again. The convention exclusive, another great example. It's all entirely reuse. It's all just Frankenstein parts. Well, the core body is reuse, and then Frankenstein parts thrown into the accessories and the head swaps and what have you from previous releases. Well, I say previous releases, Fresh Monkey Fiction. They're not. That convention exclusive you're advertising has got a head on it from the Soldier of Fortune line that we've still not had in hand, but let's not get into that. That's not the topic of discussion for today. But they are definitely previewing far more stuff than we're getting in hand. Anyway, I'm going to leave that gripe alone. And, you know, it got me to thinking because reuse is common. It's super common. It's been common since the 80s. And, you know, toy collecting of this nature, action figure toy collecting that appeals to the adult market has been a reuse-heavy space. We all know, or certainly heard, the cost of tooling is super, super expensive. It's very, very high. And so the level of reuse just keeps costs low, arguably low. I think there's an argument to be made that perhaps heavy reuse action army builder figures should come at a lower price, but that's another issue. But you know, it keeps prices low. It allows them to like recoup that high cost of tooling so that they can continue to provide consumers product. It also provides a little bit of safety, you know, more obscure, riskier characters, deeper cuts from lore. You know, if it's a licensed product, is a bit safer because the investment cost in the creation of the figure outside of some repaint activity is not too high. You know, you got all that kind of stuff going on. And also, I think when you look at some of the smaller lines, like your Fresh Monkey Fictions, like your Valaverse, there's an element of pride in their products. They're proud of the book that they've built. They're proud of the quality of work that they've put into the figure. And so the reuse is also, I think, being driven by something of, this is a good quality figure that we feel that we've got here, and we can make more use out of it. And, you know, I think there is something in the world of reuse that when it comes to things like superhero lines, when it comes to things like military lines, you would expect to see a lot of reuse, you know, and it's sensible reuse. It's smart. It's appropriate reuse for the type of characters, the type of product they're producing. You know, a spandexed book that is just sort of, you know, spandex and underpants, but different characters are wearing different color variations of the same kind of vibe, especially in the comic book space where, you know, there's kind of uniformity around some of the uniforms. It's kind of fine, you know. Military lines as well, you know, perhaps it's, you know, perhaps reuse stands out a little bit more in military lines because the uniformality is so uniform. But that's the point, isn't it? You know, if you've got an army builder figure like that gridiron skull mask dude, I've forgotten the name. You know, it should be more common because these are military figures wearing uniforms. There should be a uniformality to them, existing in a similar military universe. The equipment they're provided on various teams and factions and armies should be the same. You know, and then that additional accessory selection allows you, in your world of army building, to add some small amount of variation to give it flavour. So, you know, while the reuse is standing out, particularly with things like the Fresh Monkey Fiction, this new Major Striker that I flashed up on screen earlier on in this vid, again, future editing, Chris, make sure you put it up, is fundamentally the general uniform. The general's uniform that was in green previously is now in blue. But that makes sense. You know, dress uniforms should be the same. Berets and hats and helmets and, you know, it all should be the same. So I would consider it smart and appropriate reuse. I suppose the fact that it's full reuse, I mean, largely full, like the book, the vest, the loadouts, you know, it's full reuse to all intents and purposes. It is just complete redeco. It's repaint, maybe with a different head on it, even though the heads are the same. They're just different helmets with different patterns painted on them. Certainly does catch the eye, though, despite all of that, which I've said, and reasons why. There are certainly reasons why not, and it does start to feel like a little bit. What was the phrase I used at the beginning of the video? Reuse fatigue. You know, it does start to feel like they're fatiguing us with reuse, because whenever you hear, "Oh, new product announced," you go, "Right, I'll go take a look at that," or I'll go watch the Hasbro stream or the Big Bad Workshop podcast to find out more about this new product, and then you just be like, "Oh. Well, it's not new product though, is it? It's just yet another variation on the same theme." And while, you know, you might be looking at the product and going, "Yes, it does look badass. It would make a great army builder," you're noticing the reuse before you're realizing what's going on with the figure, really, or you know, nothing at all. And what that does is it kind of diminishes the line. You know, it becomes quite superficial. The depth of what you're getting from a line is quite shallow, and so your level of interest, your level of curiosity, your level of kind of customer engagement with the product starts to reduce because you're not seeing anything that's new or exciting. This is especially more damaging, I suppose, when you start to see lots of reuse coming through in unique characters, you know, or in the world of military lines, for example, where you want a broader and wider selection of specialisms. So, you know, Fresh Monkey Fiction are just churning out a fuck ton of basically like infantry trooper types, you know, over and over and over again. You know, standard fatigues, standard tactical vest, standard helmets over and over again. Valaverse is guilty of this too. You know, lots of the reuse has started to diminish the impact of the what could be the potential for a broader selection of specialisms and interesting, even if it's army builders, interesting army builders. Maybe less so with Valaverse. I'm perhaps being a little bit harsh there. I don't follow the line closely enough to know precisely, but you know, you want to see some variation so that your collecting has shelf presence and curiosity and intrigue about it, you know? So it's particularly egregious, getting back to my point, particularly egregious with, you know, unique characters with lots of heavy reuse, but also it gets just a bit pedestrian when you're looking at army builder characters, particularly when, like Fresh Monkey Fiction, they're not really churning out the unique characters fast enough, and some of their unique characters are just reuse again. You know, like Eraser's a great figure, and I love the lore and the idea and the personality, but ultimately the book is exactly, you know, it's that same military style book at the core for of the figure. It's just an interesting deco, interesting head sculpt, and some interesting stuff around the transparent skin sections, you know? Like this new skeleton in the Dark Directives, the skeletons that they've recently announced, that maybe I can flash up on screen again, but they, you know, how long is this going to go for? Now, we've already seen several variations, like pre-order announced for this skeleton book. Before they've even, got one in hand, we're seeing these variations. So it kind of creates this damaging loop of boredom. Now, of course, we as customers, we're to blame for this a little bit as well, because we do like the cult of the new. We are about new and shiny and exciting and different. And we do exist in a world where our hunger for something new and different and exciting puts these companies in a bit of a difficult position, particularly when, going back to my earlier comment, things like tooling is more expensive. But you want your line to have personality, and at a certain point, the reuse takes away that level of personality, particularly when your reuse is being churned out more frequently than your more unique characters. I think this is one of the reasons why G.I. Joe Classified series does so well, because the reuse kind of gets integrated as uniformal elements, but the unique character aspect, combined with the nostalgia, of course, because we all love the cartoons and the comic books, allows it to kind of have some momentum. And they do have wacky, crazy specialists, or weird, supernatural dudes with flaming swords and shit. So the reuse feels less egregious, stands out less. And when you do get a character that's just like really heavy reuse and is bland in that nature that lines like Fresh Monkey Fiction risk becoming, like the Grim Reaper heavy gunner dude whose name has just suddenly fallen out my head. Holy shit, what's that figure called? I only got it a short while before Christmas. Anyway, I'll end up in the weeds just sitting here trying to remember, but it stands out to us, it stands out to us within the line. So what am I trying to say? Well, I'm trying to say that, we as customers perhaps could acknowledge that we're being a little bit demanding in this space. We want uniform army builders, and then we complain when we see lots of reuse making our figures uniform, being obsessed with new, being obsessed with original, being obsessed with novelty all the time. But on the flip side of that, I think, in the comments I saw a lot of, Fresh Monkey Fiction are getting a bit like Valaverse now with all this reuse and repeat stuff. And they're right, they are right. And I think we are experiencing a little bit of reuse fatigue. I certainly, like Marvel Legends is another example. I mentioned superheroes in spandex. When I get the figures and I look at them and I think, well, all this is that very same book with a different head on it and a paint job. So there's no variation, no sculpting, no nothing going on. And also, like McFarlane, let's not ignore my favourite, Todd McFarlane, because his reuse is, his reuse is a bit egregious. Like there was a Superman that I had that I sold on because it looked on the surface like a good classic Superman, but then the belt and the pants weren't right because he'd reused a kind of more obscure, deeper cut version of Superman for the parts, So is it a problem, the reuse? Not yet, I don't think. Maybe you'll disagree, and I'd invite you to the comments down below to share your thoughts. What figure has really, ground your gears about the reuse, or how do you not mind? Do you broadly not mind? Like me, I'm kind of a bit relaxed about it, and all that good stuff. But, as usual, I saw a thing going on, triggered a thought I'd put the thought on camera, and that's what I've done once again today. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, but that's I'm going to wrap it up there before I start warbling on far too much. So thanks for coming and watching. Great to have you hang out. Come back round for another video sometime soon, and have yourself a great day. All right, take it easy, folks.